Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Interviews from the Crypt. I am Adam Holtz-Apple, and joining us tonight is writer and director of the Mortuary Collection, Ryan Spindell. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And to kick things off, what drew you to the horror genre? Was it like going to the video store as a kid and seeing all the awesome cover art, or late night HBO flicks, kind of a mix of both?
Yeah, I think it is a mix of both. I'm lucky enough to be of the generation in which all of the movies came from the rental store. Um, I remember my parents were pretty strict about what I could watch at a young age, but also I saw Nightmare on Elm Street way too young. I was probably 5 or 6. I kind of accidentally watched it one night alone in our cabin, and it scarred me for a really long time. And I was terrified of horror movies. And I remember I would avoid horror movies at all costs, but whenever I would go to rent a movie at the video store, I would spend an inordinate amount of time in the horror section, sort of like kind of half looking at the video covers. And just sort of sometimes looking at the back of the boxes and then being like, well, I'll never watch this, and kind of putting it away. But I remember, we all have those iconic boxes that really sort of leapt out as a kid. And I remember the Dead Alive box art with the woman's face, and she's like stretching open the skeleton. It's so provocative. It's funny. It doesn't really have anything to do with the movie, but then it kind of does, but in a sort of way that you don't expect. It's just a prime example of a box art using something that's evocative to draw you in. And I still love that stuff to this day. And it's something I miss very much, which is why I own all of these books that just celebrate cover art on both novels and also movies. And it's something that, as you know, we're just getting to the point now where we're putting together the Blu-ray for the Mortuary Collection. The movie I just made, it's like one of the things I'm most excited about is like figuring out what that box art's going to be, and finding the right artist and sort of putting it all together.
Awesome. And speaking of the Mortuary Collection, it's an anthology flick, which you don't see too many of those today. I know a few years ago there's kind of a resurgence with VHS and Trick or Treat and ABCs of horror, but this has more of an Amicus style 70s feel. Did you kind of want that look when you went to make the film, or was it just a happy accident?
No, it was 100% intentional. I had been doing a deep dive on all of the Amicus films at the time when I wrote this. And it's funny, somebody recently asked me, they were like, when you decided to make this anthology, why did you decide to do it all yourself? Why did you decide to not sort of, have several different directors and writers, which is the norm for anthologies? And I was thinking that when I wrote this movie, that wasn't the norm for anthologies. When I wrote this movie, I had been watching, Creep Show, Tales from the Dark Side, all the Amicus films, which have a single director, and that was the normal sort of thing. And the VHS movies kind of gave rise to this new kind of aggregate system for the anthology format, and basically kind of dominated it completely. So it feels like I'm some sort of egomaniac over here, like deciding to do everything myself. When the reality is that's just kind of how I always imagined these kind of movies were made.
Yeah, and that's a good point, is how the older ones did have the single director, writer, and you can kind of tell with how they flow. And I think that's why I picked up on with your film was it felt very even paced, and all the segments intertwined well together, with there not being a strong one or a weak one. They all just kind of worked evenly. And I'd actually caught the Babysitter Murders at Nightmares Film Fest in 2016. So it was a pleasure to see that added to this anthology. did you kind of want to build off of that when you went into this? I noticed a lot of the cast throughout the film was from that short, and just was it something you'd want to build off of originally?
Yeah, I actually wrote the feature first, the all of the things sort of wrapped around, and then we were sort of me and my collaborators were kind of looking at the feature, and we were trying to figure out how we would get it off the ground because anthology movies, for those of people who don't know, are virtually impossible to get made within the Hollywood system. The studios just hate them because they're hard to market, apparently. I would argue that nobody's figured out how to market them yet, that there is a way for it to be done, but nobody tells Hollywood what Hollywood wants. And so basically, I had this feature that I really loved, and me and my collaborators got together and we said, well, look, we know how to make shorts. Let's pull one of the shorts out and let's make it as a proof of concept. And the Babysitter Murders just so happened to be the most contained and have the least amount of actors. So it was the cheapest one to pull off, which is kind of surprising because there's a lot of stunts in it. That was something that we kind of learned as we went along. But
Right.
yeah, we made that one. You know, the feature was envisioned first, but we made that one to kind of sell people on the idea of what the movie would be like. So we had always sort of planned on bringing back Caitlin as Sam, and sort of there's a lot of clues about Raven's End buried into even the Babysitter Murders, just like the little nuggets of these ideas that we hadn't quite fleshed out yet, but like magnets on the fridge and sort of different details throughout the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, and you'd filmed this in Astoria, which is where Goonies was filmed. Did you get a chance to check out any of those locations or use them in any of the shots?
Yes, I did. I mean, I lived there for 2 months, and every day, it's funny. I could not drive anywhere in that town without hearing the theme song playing through my head in the beginning. But we used a bunch of locations from Goonies, like the house that we shot at, the Flavel Mansion.
Mhm.
That is actually the museum in Goonies. So there's a sequence in the
Oh,
beginning where Mikey's dad is like putting up a flag in front of
yeah,
the
yeah.
house. That's in there. I think we used some of the same wharf shots that they used when trying to think which character it was. That was it Chunk? No, it wasn't Chunk. The character that leans into the bin of crabs and comes out as the police cars
Oh,
zip
yeah,
by.
yeah. Oh, I know which part you're talking about, and it's
Yeah,
just not
yeah,
clicking,
no,
but
it
yeah.
just it was like living in the Goonies. It was awesome, and that is such a cool town. It's such a cinematic little town that's completely off the grid, and people there were just awesome. It was so refreshing to get out of Los Angeles and shoot in a place where sort of people were excited about making movies, and everywhere we pointed the camera, it just had this kind of foggy Pacific Northwest aesthetic that we were going for.
Yeah, and that you can totally see that in the film. I think it kind of adds to the ambiance of it. And then you have Clancy Brown as kind of a Dr. Tear crypt keeper type
Mhm.
character. How'd he come to get involved in the project?
So he came through the traditional. Well, let me think here. That was a tricky one because we always knew from the front. So this was a very small movie, a very low budget movie, and so a
Right.
lot of the cast are just personal friends of mine, just some of the best
Okay.
actors that I know that I kind of sort of reworked into the different roles. But we always knew that Montgomery was going to be sort of the centerpiece of the whole movie, and we needed somebody
Hmm.
wonderful. And I'm a huge fan. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of Clancy Brown and character actors like that in general.
Right.
These men and women who sort of they're always on the sidelines, but they always steal the show.
Yeah.
Um, and so we went out to Clancy. Was one of the first people we went out to, and his Kelly, his manager, he actually really championed the film and sort of pushed Clancy like, "Hey, just take a look at this short film," because we had the short film also to show, which was a really helpful tool. And he was like, watch this short film and read the script. I think it's really special. It's a no budget movie. You're not making any money off of it, just to put it out there. But I think it's something you'll respond to. And surprisingly enough, Clancy doesn't need work. He works constantly. But he
Right.
really responded to the script, and he really responded to, I think, just our kind of dogged determination to make this movie no matter what. I think that sort of sparked some sort of the thing that kind of inspires him to be in movies to begin with. And he was just an absolute joy to have on set. And I'm so glad I don't have to lie and say that he was nice when he was really like a son of a bitch, but he actually just the coolest guy. He sort of helped all of the actors feel comfortable. He like kind of set the tone for the crew. Locals, people in town would come and visit. He would show them around, give them tours. He's just the best.
That's awesome. And yeah, watching it, I just feel like he kind of is that part. Like he sells it so well, where thinking about it, people are like, oh, who would you cast? And I can't really think of anyone else in that role other than Clancy. I think he knocked it out of the park. And Jennifer Irwin was in one of the segments from the Goldbergs and the Gate. Was that another personal friend type deal, or did
she was actually, no, I did not know Jennifer personally beforehand, and she was a very last minute casting sort of swing that Rich, our casting director, made. She was just the best. I'd been a fan of hers, but it was one of those roles that we were sort of down to the last minute and we hadn't found the right person, and she just sort of popped up all of a sudden and read for the role, and I was just immediately like, yes, just bring her in. And my regret for some of, this movie has so many actors in it, especially for an indie, just people playing these little bit roles. And there was oftentimes I'd be working with someone like Jennifer, and I would work with her for a half a day or something, and I was like, oh man, I wish I could like do more with her. I wish I had more scenes, because she had so much to give in such a little sort of slot to let it show. And I was like, oh man, I wish I could have a whole story based around her. And maybe I will. Maybe you'll be a sequel or something, and we'll put
who knows? You could go anywhere with that. And I do have one question about the effects. How the back-breaking effect in that first segment work?
How did it work?
Was a nice surprise.
Oh, awesome. That's just the most old school trick in the book. It's the actress, Christine, is sort of has her like, if this is the mirror here and this is the wall. So Christine is kind of like got her legs like this, and then we had a second person underneath her kicking their legs. So when she folded backwards, it was like, you had these kicking legs. Yeah. It was really fun. Great. And I love that. That's the kind of stuff I love the most, like finding those really basic rudimentary solutions to sort of complicated problems, and they just always look the best.
Yeah, because I'm like, there's no way that's CGI, but I'm like, that maybe it was. And yeah, it's always great to see practical effects anymore. But
I love it.
Yeah.
We did practical effects in every single part of this movie we could. And the only time that we used visual effects was when we were really we were backed into a corner and we had no way out. But we really set out from the start to focus on practical effects, and Studio ADI, this amazing special effects company, luckily came on board and sort of did the movie at a fraction of their normal rate, because they also loved it and sort of enabled us to kind of bring these set pieces to life in a really special way.
Right, and I think I read it was Tom Woodruff that did some of the makeup, correct? That worked on Monster Squad and with Stan Winston and everything.
Tom Woodruff and Alec Gillis. They won an Academy Award for Death Becomes Her. They did Tremors. They did Starship Troopers. When you go to their shop, they have the giant brain bug from Starship Troopers in their wall. It's the coolest. And they're the coolest guys. They've been doing this for, 20 years or something professionally, and they've been top of their game. And nothing about them on set, you would think it was their first day on the job. They're just all enthusiasm, all excitement. They love monsters. They love rubber. They love goop. It's the best.
That's awesome. And I'd seen this premiered at Fantastic Fest 2019. Did the Shudder deal kind of come from that to be a Shudder exclusive, or did you have any other festivals planned for this?
We premiered at Fantastic, and Shudder was one of the first people that approached us about picking up the movie. and they were easily the most enthusiastic and aggressive about it. And so it was an easy choice for us to go with them. And that was pre-pandemic, so we had no idea that people were going to be locked in their homes for a year, and that Shudder was going to explode. And it's funny because when we first were talking to Shudder, I was hesitant because there's this thing that's ingrained in your brain as a filmmaker that when you make a film, you need it to go to Netflix, because my grandmother has Netflix and I can tell my grandmother to watch the movie and she can go to Netflix and watch it. And that seems to be sort of the golden goose. But as I was thinking about it after the fact, I realized that it's so often the case that small films like this pop up on Netflix and then they just disappear into the stacks, 2 days later.
Right.
And nobody, or maybe people watch them, but you don't hear about them. And I realized that Shudder, everybody doesn't have Shudder. And so, maybe there's a less of a net being cast, but man, the people that do have Shudder, they watch everything on Shudder, and that they're going to watch your movie, and they're going to comment on it. And if they like it, they're going to sort of celebrate it. And it ended up being easily the best decision we could have made. And I think this is probably already happening, but I anticipate people, genre filmmakers fighting for slots on Shudder in the next year or two when it becomes easily sort of the best place to have your movie.
Yeah, I can see that. And their exclusives are very well done from the ones I've watched. I know my wife and we had watched Scare Me and Host and Mortuary Collection, and we're just like, Shudder's really killing it right now with the exclusives. So it's nice to see a company go to bat on maybe a lesser known director and putting the film out there. Like, looking at their social media, has that kind of given people a push to watch your film, or so.
And they're tiny. I don't know what the general idea is of Shudder as a company, because they're connected to AMC. So I think some people might think that they're some kind of big corporate entity, but they're not. It's a tiny group of really passionate horror fans making everything work behind the scenes. And that, when you start seeing the behind the hood, when you start seeing the wizard pull the curtain back, it's even more exciting to be working with them.
Right. And you'd participated in their Shudder Fest Halloween Day marathon. You, Clancy Brown, and I'm blanking on the names of the two producers.
Justin Ross and Allison Friedman. Yeah,
Allison and Justin. And how was that event for you? I know I was on all day, kind of watching all the panels and stuff to get a feel of being at a convention.
Yeah. But doing the best you can with what you got right now in the state, huh? It was awesome. I mean, it was an honor to have our movie play on Halloween night of all nights. Was just surreal for us. I mean, this movie took about 7 years to make, and we spent the last year, because of the pandemic, all of our festival screenings were canceled. And so we kind of spent the last year just sitting on the movie. And when that much time goes by, you start to doubt the project. You start to think, is this even a good movie? Like, is this I don't know. No one's seen it yet. And so having it sort of be released on Shudder and then have this amazing outpouring of just incredibly thoughtful and kind people reaching out to me and saying that the movie sort of inspired them in some way, or just gave them a good fun 2 hours, whatever the case. That's been sort of a really special experience for me. And then to have Shudder kind of screen us at a drive-in on Halloween night, and to have characters from our movie, they had actors dressed up as characters from our movie running around scaring people. I guess that's about the best thing that you could ask for in this current climate.
Yeah, that's great. And speaking of the pandemic, have you been working on a few projects during this, or just kind of brainstorming ideas?
It's funny because when the pandemic started, I had a writing job that I was supposed to be working on, and I was having such a hard time working because this notion of writing spooky stories when the world was seemingly ending felt really sort of insignificant, and I was really sort of doubting my my career path, because I was looking at, first responders and people who are out there saving lives, and thinking about how, I'm making horror movies. Like, what does that even mean? But as the pandemic started, going on and sort of stretching out, and people were stuck in their homes, and people started really leaning into entertainment to sort of help them get through and help them process what was going on in the world around them. I think I realized what an important thing it is that filmmakers do, even though it may not seem like it on the surface. I think providing people with escapism and providing people with entertainment, and just sort of even a minute to like not dwell on all the sort of negative things that have been happening in 2020 seems like a really special thing. So that kind of renewed my my passion for the process, and I've definitely leaned into it heavy during the pandemic, and I've been doing a ton of writing and a ton of prepping, and I'm attached to a few different projects. So it's all about, who knows what's going to happen when things open up again, or when things are going to open up again. But I'm excited and motivated and ready to go when I can.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned the drive-through screening. Have drive-throughs in your area been kind of the main source for movies when you're not streaming? I know theaters in our area have been open, closed, but drive-throughs have kind of been the constant throughout all of this.
Yeah, I've been to the drive-in a couple times. The one that I keep going to, I know there's more nearby. The one I go to is kind of a haul. It's about a 45-minute drive, so it's not something I could do in a regular. I mean, before the pandemic happened, I would go to the movies 2 or 3 times a week. So this has been a really hard period for me, just taking the thing I love the most away. But what's nice is LA has been, all of these different outdoor screening venues have been popping up recently. And now there's 30 of them, in which they're small, but they're like, you can go see Raiders of the Lost Ark in one place, or Jurassic Park in another place, and Sex, Lies, and Videotape in another. And that's one of the perks of living in a city that loves movies as much as LA.
Right, and to wrap things up, what are your top 5 anthology films?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm gonna have to say I'm gonna start with Asylum, the Amicus film, because I love the wraparound. I think it has one of the best wraparounds, and that's something that's so often overlooked in anthology movies, and I think it's such an important component to it. And I hope that moving forward, more people pay attention to the wraparound story, because it's not a throwaway; it's just as important. Of course, I have to say Creepshow. You just have to. That's the movie that the one of the maybe 3 horror movies that I could actually watch when I was a kid, and it would always fool me into thinking it was a kid's movie because of the animation, and so it would like kind of trick me and my siblings, and we'd start watching it, and we watched it 100 times, but every time I'd be like, it's animation. This is a kid's movie, right? Okay, cool. This is safe, and it very much wasn't, but in the best way. And I think I love that kind of horror that, like, I guess it'd be called gateway horror that.
Yeah, I could see gateway horror. Yeah.
Kind of eases you in. It's not trying to create dread. It's sort of playing with the format, and the gore is over the top and colorful and fun. And it kind of lets you experience these things without sort of ripping your heart out and slamming it on the floor like some other horror films might. I'm gonna go the unofficial Creepshow 3. Wait, why am I drawing a blank? Wait, don't tell me. Oh man, what is it? Now I just blanked out on it. Tales from the Dark Side.
Yes.
Man, that was a close one. Tales from the Dark Side. Incredible. Just the best. Oh man, the Lover's Vow one with the gargoyle, it still gets me to this day. And it has a pretty good wraparound. I would say kind of a throwaway wraparound. Like it doesn't have the stakes aren't really complicated. The witch who's like
trying to cook the kid.
Yeah. I'm gonna go Body Bags just because
nice.
Man, I love seeing Carpenter and Craven and Toby Hooper and all of these people coming together. John Carpenter freaks me out as the Crypt Keeper character. They really did a number on him. It's intense. But those stories, it's funny because that has one of the most kooky wraparounds. The wraparound is so tongue in cheek and weird, but the stories are pretty serious and pretty intense, actually.
yeah, the stories seem to be well done, and then the wraparound, and that's just like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
there, but
It's like campy fun that's just for the fans of the genre, right? Oh man, the last one. Man, what's going to be the last one? There's so many of them. I guess I'm going to go. I'm going to go trick or treat. I'm going to go trick or
nice.
treat for two reasons. One, because I think it's just an amazingly well done movie. But two, having just made an anthology movie myself, I realize how difficult a process that must have been for Michael Dougherty to not only make a film like that, but make it at a studio level, at that kind of budget
Right.
with those kind of actors, and then to have it sort of, unceremoniously dumped without any sort of fanfare is just a crime. So
Yeah,
yeah, that would be my. Is that five?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. What about you? What's your top
um,
three?
oh, my top five. I gotta go. Doctor Terror's House of Horrors. It's
Ooh, classic. Yeah.
yeah, like not many people know it, and it surprises me because you have Donald Sutherland, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing. The wraparound's kind of hokey, but the stories
Yeah.
are great. Um,
Heavy hitters.
Vault of Horror.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Great.
I it's got the Tales from the Crypt feel, but so much darker to me. You don't really have the Crypt Keeper character, but just the way they did it works really well. Creep Show, of course, just having moved to Pittsburgh about a year ago, it'd be a shame if I didn't mention that. Trick or Treat, because it's really well done. I'm not sure why it never caught on with the mainstream. Like, it's got a strong cult following, but I
Yeah.
just,
It's criminal. It's
yeah,
criminal.
yeah, I figured that'd be one that would have caught on with the audience, and it just seems like it still hasn't for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The fifth one, I guess I would have to say Asylum as well. It's one that, even though you know what the wraparound is and what the end game's gonna be, the stories themselves really shine in that. So,
I agree. The stories are wonderful. The wraparound and the stories. I sometimes, I want to go to the original Tales from the Crypt because that also has some that I'm always
mm-hmm.
like neck and neck as far as my Amicus films go. And I, of course, the all through the house segment is just, it was great
Classic.
then. It was great again in the on the show. It's just such a good episode.
Yeah, it is. And, just the way they film that too, you just feel the tension build throughout that whole segment until the final blow. And
It's amazing.
yeah,
That that I think the first shot. I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right, but I think the first shot of that segment in the '70s one is it starts out the camera's on a roaring fire, and then the
mm-hmm.
camera kind of the music's playing, and it's like an idealistic Christmas setting, and then the camera pans over, and you just see a newspaper, and somebody's like, it's a guy, and he's like yelling at his wife, and then blood spatters from the newspaper from the inside,
Yeah, you
and he
just,
falls dead with the fire poker sticking out of his head,
yeah.
and it's all in one shot, and so much story is told in just those like 30 seconds, and that's like it's really smart. I really loved it.
Yeah, that one's a classic too. And just, it's a great time of year for at least watching all through the house. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
yeah. And do you have a website or anything people can check out what you've got going on in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the social medias. I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm going to be posting a lot of stuff on both of
Oh,
stuff that's sort of been in the wings. And we have my company. I have a little production company called Trapdoor Pictures that desperately needs to be updated. The site, but that's where you can find all of the information on all the films we've made so far, and hopefully films in the future.
Awesome. And I want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with us. And remember, kids, if you feel chill, it's not the cold. You're in the crypt.
Thank you so much, man.